Chapter 19. JD's fingers touched the black velvet box in his pocket. He had picked it up on his way to meeting Scott for coffee, and he'd been unable to keep his fingers from touching it. "Okay, what's going on, man?" Scott snapped his fingers in front of JD's face. "You haven't heard one word I said." JD blinked, bringing his focus back to the present. He wanted to tell Scott his news. Heck, he wanted to shout it from the rooftops. But he also knew Scott was battling a feeling of loneliness, and he didn't want to rub it in. "Spill it." Scott leaned back and crossed his arms. JD withdrew his hand from his pocket and held out the black box. "Before you say anything, I know it's fast, but I've known I loved Callie for months, and I don't want to take the chance of losing her again." Scott opened the box and let out a low whistle. "It's exquisite. So what's the problem?" A sigh escaped JD's lips as he thought back over the last week. Callie had been home late every night, and while she usually called to let him know, he still wasn't enjoying eating dinner alone. He'd had enough of that to last a lifetime. "It's her job. She's been working long hours, and while I want to propose, I don't want to marry someone who will be gone most evenings, you know?" Scott closed the box and handed it back. "As you know, I'm no expert, but I'd say talk to her. If she knew how you felt, maybe she'd decide to make a change." JD nodded. Scott was right. He'd talk to her tonight, and if all went well, then he could propose. He didn't want to think about what he'd do if all didn't go well. I groaned as I glanced at my watch. I was going to be late again. This latest case had me working nearly 12-hour days, and I'd had to cancel on JD twice already this week. He'd said he had something important to talk about, so I could only hope that he'd forgive me. Grabbing my purse as soon as the car was parked, I hurried up to his door and knocked. It opened a moment later, but JD's face was not smiling. "Come on in." He held the door open, and I bit my lip as I stepped inside. He wasn't going to break up with me, was he? I knew this week had been hard on him, but I thought he was the type to stick it out. "Sit down." He pointed to the couch, and a feeling of dread blanketed me. "Callie, I love you. I'm pretty sure I've loved you from the moment I saw you, but I'm not loving your job right now." I nodded. "I know. It is busy this week, but when this case is over, it will get better." "What about when the next case comes along?" What do you want me to do? Quit my job?" Anger stirred in my stomach. "I was wondering if you would come work for me. The hours will be better, and I need someone to help with hiring the staff and putting the final touches on the office." I considered his proposal. Once, I had thought of nothing other than being a lawyer, but the hours were taking their toll on me, and I knew it would be worse once Hope arrived. "I could offer you a generous benefit package with maternity leave. Plus, it would be amazing to work with my wife every day." My head popped up. Did he say wife? JD pulled a black box from his pocket and opened the lid. My breath caught in my throat, and tears of joy pricked my eyes. I looked from him down to the quarter-carat diamond ring sparkling in his hands and nodded. He slipped the ring out of the box and onto my finger. The light caught the stone, sending arcs of color on the wall. It was the most stunning ring I had ever seen. "Yes," I said, "to both your questions." "I know it's getting closer to your due date," he said, "but I wanted us to at least be engaged before Hope comes. Then we can have the wedding after, when you're up for it." I shook my head. "No, I want to do it before. We can do a small service at the church. I'm sure Pastor Tony would marry us." "Callie, are you sure? We've got the opening of the center coming soon, and we still need to get your apartment ready for Hope." "I'm sure," I said, cutting him off. "I want Hope to be officially yours before she's born." He smiled. "Okay, we'll ask Pastor Tony tomorrow." I looked around the office I had called my second home for the last few years. Though I had often thought I would be leaving this place, I had always assumed it would be for a bigger office, not a completely different career. I wasn't sad, though. The long hours had taken their toll on my pregnant body, and I was looking forward to getting off earlier. Plus, my priorities had shifted. I no longer longed to be partner now. Now I just wanted to have time to spend with my daughter and my fiancé. Fiancé. I still hadn't totally wrapped my head around that, but the ring on my finger served as a constant reminder. Hopefully there would be no hitches in the wedding planning. Getting married 8 months pregnant hadn't been my dream wedding, but I knew I loved JD, and I wanted both of our names to be on the birth certificate when Hope arrived. That was now more important than a fancy wedding or even wearing the perfect dress. I just hoped we could get it all planned in 3 weeks' time. "I'm gonna miss you," Tina said, sniffing back tears as I approached her desk. In my hands was a small box with my few personal items packed. I'll miss you too, but I'll still be in the city. We'll get together. Plus, I'll see you at the wedding. Of all the things I would miss about my job, Tina was at the top of the list. I gave her a final hug, waved goodbye to everyone else, and walked out of the building. A mixture of fear and relief washed over me as I climbed in the car. I was excited to be helping JD out at the center, but a worry persisted that I would miss being a lawyer. The last thing I wanted to do was resent leaving. Lord, please send me your peace. A calmness covered my shoulders and warmed my body, and I eased the car into drive to meet JD at the center. When I arrived, he ushered me in, planting a quick kiss on my lips and leaving me wanting more. The smell of new carpet and wet paint permeated the air. I'm so glad you're here. I set up a few interviews today, and I'd really like your input. I glanced around the nearly finished office space, surprised at how close he was to being able to open. Not only were the new carpets laid and the walls repainted, but the receptionist desk was installed and the waiting chairs were stacked in one corner of the room. So the doctors have already been hired, but we need to hire 3 nurses, a bookkeeper, and a receptionist, JD said, rifling through a stack of papers. I had hoped the afternoon would be a little more relaxing, but wanting to help JD out in any way I could, I followed him into one of the offices that had also been finished. He had set up a table and a few chairs. Make yourself comfortable here and I'll get you some tea. You won't have to move an inch. I'll bring the interviewees back to you. I smiled up at him. As my due date got closer, he grew more and more attentive and doting. He had even left his own apartment and driven to the store at midnight the other night to buy me nachos and pickles, which he had dropped off with a quick kiss before returning to his own place. Minutes later, he returned with a steaming mug of green tea for me, and the parade of interviewees began. When the last one was gone, we discussed the merits of each, agreeing nearly completely on our favorites. How much longer do you think the center needs before it opens? I asked as he gathered up the resumes. Honestly, I think we can open in 2 weeks, just before the wedding. I think Rebecca will be able to handle a few days without me at the very beginning. An elaborate honeymoon was out of the question for us, as I was now too pregnant even to fly safely, but I didn't mind. To me, the honeymoon would just get to be spending the night curled up in JD's arms. I was growing tired of having to say goodbye to him every night and climb into my bed alone. What are you thinking about? JD asked, wrapping his arms around me. Due to my ever-increasing belly, they no longer completely encircled me, but landed on the back of my hips. My lips pulled into a seductive smile as I wound my arms around his neck. I was thinking that the perfect honeymoon will just be the day I don't have to say goodnight to you, and I can wake up with you beside me the next morning. His lips parted as his eyes filled with desire. I can't wait for that day either. My nerve endings tingled as his mouth closed on mine. A heat flared inside as his tongue explored my mouth. His lips then traveled down my neck, landing on the soft flesh between my collarbone and my neck. My breath caught in my throat and my hands twisted in his hair. If he could affect me this deeply with all our clothes on, I could only imagine the havoc he could wreak with no barrier between us.